The world's most valuable real estate isn't in Manhattan or Dubai. It's buried under thousands of feet of Arctic ice. Right now, beneath the frozen waters of the North Pole, lies an estimated $35 trillion in untapped resources, enough wealth to reshape the global balance of power for the next century. And here's what should terrify you. Russia already controls 53% of the Arctic coastline. China calls itself a near-Arctic state, despite being 900 miles away. And the United States is dangerously unprepared for what's coming. The Arctic ice is melting faster than ever before, and with it, the greatest geopolitical chess match of the 21st century has already begun. This isn't about climate change. It's about who will control the resources that will power the world's future. The Arctic Circle encompasses 8 nations: Russia, the United States, Canada, Norway, Denmark through Greenland, Iceland, Finland, and Sweden. But make no mistake, this is a 3-way race between superpowers. Russia has been militarizing the Arctic since 2007, reopening 50 Soviet-era bases and deploying advanced missile systems. China, despite having no Arctic territory, has invested billions in what it calls the Polar Silk Road. Meanwhile, the US operates with just 2 functional icebreakers compared to Russia's 41. The stakes? Control over the last untapped frontier on Earth. According to the US Geological Survey, the Arctic contains 90 billion barrels of undiscovered oil, 13% of the world's remaining reserves. Add 1,670 billion cubic feet of natural gas, 30% of global undiscovered reserves, and 44 billion barrels of natural gas liquids. At current prices, the hydrocarbons alone are worth over $11 trillion. But here's what the headlines miss. The real prize isn't oil and gas, it's rare earth minerals. Greenland alone holds 25% of global rare earth mineral reserves, the critical elements that power everything from smartphones to F-35 fighter jets. Alaska contains deposits of 49 out of 50 minerals the US government deems critical for national security. The estimated value of Arctic minerals? $1.5 to $2 trillion in Russian territory alone, with similar wealth scattered across Greenland, Canada, and Alaska. These aren't just rocks, they're the building blocks of 21st century power. Neodymium for electric vehicle motors, dysprosium for wind turbines, lithium for batteries. The Arctic could break China's stranglehold on 90% of global rare earth production. That's why Beijing is pouring billions into Arctic infrastructure, despite being nowhere near the region. Factor 1 establishes the Arctic as the world's last great resource frontier, containing wealth that could fund nations for generations. Here's the paradox that changes everything. Climate change is both destroying the Arctic and making it accessible. Since 1979, Arctic sea ice has shrunk by 13% per decade. By 2025, this year, some models show ice-free summers becoming regular occurrences. This isn't an environmental story. It's a strategic revolution. The Northeast Passage along Russia's coast cuts shipping time from Shanghai to Rotterdam by 40%, from 48 days through Suez to just 35 days. The Northwest Passage through Canada could reduce Pacific Atlantic transit by 3,000 nautical miles. For a single container ship, that's $500,000 saved per voyage in fuel costs alone. Multiply that by thousands of ships annually, and you're looking at a complete restructuring of global trade worth hundreds of billions. But here's the critical detail most analyses miss. Whoever controls these passages controls global commerce. Russia claims the Northern Sea Route as internal waters. Canada says the Northwest Passage belongs to them. The US and China call them international straits. This isn't a legal dispute. It's the setup for the first great power confrontation of the climate era. Factor 2 reveals how melting ice transforms the Arctic from a frozen barrier into the world's most valuable shipping lanes. While the world focused on Ukraine, Russia quietly built the most comprehensive Arctic military infrastructure since the Cold War. 475 new structures, 7 nuclear-powered icebreakers, with 5 more under construction. The reopening of 50 Soviet-era bases, including air bases that can deploy nuclear-capable bombers. Russia's Bastion defense creates a multi-layered dome of air defense, coastal missiles, and submarine patrols from the Barents Sea to the Bering Strait. Their northern fleet, based in Murmansk, hosts most of Russia's ballistic missile submarines, the cornerstone of their nuclear deterrent. But here's what should alarm Western strategists. In July 2024, 9 Russian and Chinese warships conducted joint Arctic patrols. For the first time ever, Chinese and Russian bombers jointly entered Alaska's air defense zone. This isn't routine military cooperation, it's a strategic partnership to dominate the Arctic. The numbers tell a stark story. Icebreakers: Russia 41, China 2, with 5 planned, USA 2. Arctic-capable military bases: Russia more than 50, NATO has 15 combined. Arctic-trained troops: Russia 80,000, USA 10,000. NATO's expansion with Finland and Sweden adds Arctic expertise, but the infrastructure gap remains massive. The US Navy projects it won't have adequate Arctic capabilities until 2029 at the earliest. Factor 3 exposes the dangerous military imbalance that could determine Arctic control for decades. China currently controls 90% of rare earth processing. Every wind turbine, every electric vehicle, every advanced military system depends on Chinese-controlled supply chains. The Arctic could shatter this monopoly. Alaska's has more than 150 rare earth prospects, could place it among the top 10 global producers. Greenland's Kvanefjeld deposit alone contains enough rare earths to supply 25% of global demand. Canada's Arctic holds 15.2 million tons of rare earth oxides, but extraction is only half the equation. Processing rare earths requires massive industrial infrastructure that currently exists almost exclusively in China. That's why Beijing is investing heavily in Greenland, not just for the minerals, but to control the entire supply chain from Arctic mine to global market. The strategic implications are staggering. Without Arctic rare earths, the West remains dependent on China for every green technology, every advanced weapon system, every piece of critical infrastructure. With them, the entire global power balance shifts. Factor 4 demonstrates how Arctic minerals could break China's stranglehold on critical 21st century resources. Under international law, nations control seabed resources up to 200 miles from their coast. But Arctic geography creates a sovereignty nightmare. Russia claims 1.2 million square kilometers of Arctic seabed, including the North Pole itself. Canada, Denmark, and the US have overlapping claims worth trillions. The Lomonosov Ridge, an underwater mountain range, is ground zero for this conflict. Russia says it's an extension of their continental shelf, giving them rights to vast oil and gas deposits. Canada and Denmark claim the same ridge extends from North America. The science is disputed. The stakes are not. The passages themselves create another trap. If they're internal waters, Russia and Canada can control access, charge fees, and exclude military vessels. If they're international straits, any nation can transit freely, including Chinese and American warships. This legal ambiguity is intentional. Russia and Canada recognize each other's claims to maintain control. The US and China reject both to ensure access. It's a diplomatic standoff with no resolution in sight. And as ice melts and traffic increases, the risk of confrontation grows exponentially. Factor 5 reveals how competing sovereignty claims create flashpoints for future Arctic conflicts. The convergence of these 5 factors creates an unprecedented situation. By 2030, the Arctic Ocean will be navigable for regular vessels 3 to 4 months annually. By 2050, year-round commercial shipping becomes viable. The resources extracted could be worth over $35 trillion, enough to fund entire civilizations or trigger catastrophic conflicts. 3 scenarios emerge. First, the Cold Peace. Great powers establish zones of control, share resources through tense agreements, and avoid direct confrontation. Probability: 40%. Second, the resource rush. Accelerating ice melt triggers, competitive extraction, territorial disputes escalate, and military incidents become common. Probability: 45%. Third, the Arctic War. A miscalculation over shipping routes or resource claims triggers military confrontation between nuclear powers. Probability: 15%, but rising. The second-order effects reshape everything. Europe breaks energy dependence on Russia by developing Arctic alternatives. China's manufacturing supremacy ends as Western nations secure rare earth supplies. New Arctic ports become strategic checkpoints, rivaling the Suez Canal. Indigenous communities face cultural extinction as development accelerates. Environmental feedback loops accelerate beyond all climate models. The third-order consequences are civilizational. The emergence of Arctic city-states controlling vital passages, climate refugees from equatorial regions rushing to newly habitable Arctic lands. The complete restructuring of global naval power around ice-capable fleets. The potential for resource abundance to either fuel prosperity or catastrophic conflict. The Arctic represents the last great game of territorial expansion on Earth. But unlike past resource rushes, this one involves nuclear powers, critical minerals for human civilization, and shipping routes that could reshape global commerce. The ice is melting. The clock is ticking. And the nation that controls the Arctic controls the future. The $35 trillion under the ice isn't just wealth, it's power. Power to dominate green technology. Power to control global shipping. Power to break adversaries through resource denial. The only question is whether that power will be seized through cooperation or conflict. What happens in the Arctic won't stay in the Arctic. It will determine the balance of power for the rest of this century.